This is the Australian Hunting Podcast, hunting, shooting and fishing radio on the AHP Digital Radio Network. Visit us at australianhuntingpodcast.com.au. Sit back, relax and enjoy. Here's the host of the show, Jason Selms. All right, welcome back to the Australian Hunting Podcast, hunting, shooting and fishing radio. Great to have you back for another episode. This is a show that I've actually probably been wanting to do for a while now. So today we're going to be talking with Bastian Green from goingdark.com.au. Now this is all about thermals, this is all about infrared and everything to do with night vision. Bastian, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining me. Today we're going to talk about thermals, night vision and everything in between. So thanks for coming on the show. Appreciate it.
Well, thanks for having me, Jason. Much appreciated, mate.
No worries. Let's have a chat about yourself. Give us, give the listeners, I should say, a bit of background about yourself.
All right. Well, basically, as you can hear, I'm not from around town. So I grew up over in Germany. And as a teenager, I would go out hunting with my parents. And then after high school, I joined the military, became a tank commander, left as a lieutenant, started studying business in Spain and Germany, and eventually finished it off over here in Australia. I fell in love with the people and the country. What's not to love here? And so I decided to stay. And eventually met my wife and started a family. Career-wise, I've worked as a management consultant mainly for most of the time in the tech space here in Australia. And then at some point, it dragged me back into the firearms industry. And my previous business partner and I, we tried to secure funding for like a BCF version for hunters and shooters. And we had some good interest out of the UK and the US because they know how those chains work and that they can be quite profitable. But as the negotiations went on, the Las Vegas shooting happened and everybody stepped back and said, we can't be seen investing in this industry at this point. I'm sorry. So after that kind of failed attempt, it just wasn't the right time, I guess. I specialized in the e-commerce side of things for the bigger gun stores here in Australia. So I helped them out with their websites and how they're going to structure their background processes within the company and go out and advertise and do this whole online thing. Out of that, then eventually I sat down and said, I do want to do it myself. Where would I go? What would I do? What do I love doing? And where's my interest? And because I'm kind of like a tech geek, but as well as a hunter and all into outdoors, the intersection for me was night vision and thermal. You got the technology piece, and you have still the connection to the hunters, to the community. So that's how Going Dark basically came along.
Mate, I want to ask you, how did you get into, I guess, night vision, thermals, all that type of technology?
There are a few good videos out there, comedy videos that make fun of like the hunter, the gadget guy, or I'm the gadget guy. So I try everything under the sun and see if it works and improves my hunting. And so one of the things I started using was thermal and night vision, and it improved my hunting dramatically. So even I guess not the best tracker during the day can really score with night vision at night. And it comes basically back down to that most of the animals here, especially the feral animals here in Australia, are all nocturnal, or if they've been shot at, definitely be nocturnal. And so they move a lot more around at night, which gives you, if you can see at night, a tremendous advantage. Reflects in my scores, I guess, every time I go out.
I guess the main question here is, what is thermal? I mean, a lot of people think, they know what thermal is or night vision. Can you just give just a general explanation about, thermal and night vision? Is there a difference between the two? What does night vision mean? What does thermal mean? And what uses we can use them for?
All right. So there are three main parts. One is the traditional night vision. So the traditional night vision are what's called image intensifying vacuum tubes. So whenever you see special forces, movies, Hollywood movies, or computer games, and you see anything in that green, black kind of color scheme, that generally is what we understand as traditional night vision. And how that works is you have basically a little tube, and on one end, the photons from the starlight that the starlight generates go in, and they get transformed into electrons. They get intensified, which means just more of them. And then on the other end, it generates an image, which then is again in photons, which we with our eye can see. So what it means is basically you have very, very, very little light, a tiny light source such as the stars, and on the other end, you have enough of an image that we can see with our eyes. Now, the important thing to understand there is it's an analog signal. So it can't be recorded, it can't be changed, nothing can be added to the signal itself. It's just what it is. Now, that is the traditional military equipment, or to this day, we still continue to use that in the military because it doesn't require an external light source other than starlight as such. Now, the limitations are, one, it's very expensive. Two, it only works if there is starlight at the very least around. So in a building, it wouldn't work, right? You need an additional light source or infrared light source. The last thing is it's restricted. So we can here in Australia get generation 1, generation 2, and generation 2 plus for the civil use, but that's pretty much it. Where in the US, you can get 3 and 4, and I think the military is above 4 these days. Now, the contrast to that is what's called digital night vision. The technology is absolutely different. It is basically nothing else than a digital camera. Remember those cameras with a little screen on the back before every phone had a camera? Now it's the same technology we use in our phones. So what we have there is we have a sensor that senses the incoming light. It submits that via a digital signal to the processor, nothing else than a computer processor. And then from there, it goes onto a screen or a mini display, which is what we basically see with our eyes. So nothing different to the little camera on the back of your phone and then your display on the other side. However, these cameras are very sensitive to near infrared light. So just out of the spectrum for the human eye, basically. But what that means also from the pro side of things is it's very cheap because that technology is getting better and better. And because it's in every phone and every camera and every CCTV camera, it's just readily available, which means it's cheap. It's a digital signal, which means you can record it, you can add audio to it via a microphone, you can add a reticle compass information, you could add laser rangefinder information, so you can play with it and you can get a lot of features with it. The downside is that the battery life used to be about 2 hours max, but now is up to 18 hours for some products versus the military-grade night vision. Or the traditional night vision, it would be 20 hours and above with a single CR123 battery. The next thing is that obviously digital night vision is useless to the military because you need a infrared illuminator to generate enough light for the sensor basically to see, because it's not as sensitive as the traditional night vision. Now, for the military, that means basically you have all these people running around with infrared torches at night, and if the enemy has night vision, then they're going to stick out. So it's useless for the military purposes, but for our hunting, animals tend to not shoot back. So that's very, very good.
It's interesting. How does, one question I got, side question, I'm not sure if you probably heard this before, but it's like when I make a few videos occasionally for YouTube and so forth, and maybe when I'm out there, I use my mirrorless camera for a bit of astrophotography with a certain type of lens, so how does light pollution, like you especially would talk about, I know we don't have much of that, as you said, the traditional night vision, so like military, how does it make a difference? Like light pollution, if I try and do star effects here in Sydney, like I'm in Western Sydney, the light pollution from all the lights and from the city just is not conducive to a good astrophotography shot or video, But yet if I go out 3-4 hours, the light pollution is low. I get fantastic, beautiful star trails and so forth. And how does that make a difference, especially with, you said, the traditional with the light available from stars? Like if you're using the traditional in areas where there's going to be a lot of light pollution, does that affect it? Is that a big problem?
Okay, so the traditional night vision, basically what you see in the movies is somewhat accurate. As soon as somebody turns the light on in a room, you would get blinded. It would be way too bright. They have now, what they have in there are shutters. As soon as it goes too bright, it just shuts off. So traditional night vision becomes useless around bright light sources or light noise. It becomes overpowering. From a digital perspective, it's not going to be a problem. Like the digital sensors will just adjust. The only thing to, I guess, really note is some products like the DJX from Pulsar is so sensitive to infrared light that it can be overbearing if you were to use it during the day without closing the cap. So that particular one has a small hole in front of the cap, which you use, you close the cap and there's enough light coming through that tiny hole to be usable. But if you were to have the cap open, it would just be overbearing and you wouldn't see anything. It would just whiten out.
So also too, how come the military, they don't want us to have you said the tier 3 and 4 and so forth? What, we're not allowed to have the good stuff, eh?
Well, we could if they were made in Australia. The problem that we're having is they made either in the US or China, and neither of the countries want to share that. And they especially don't want to share it with, let's say you buy it in Australia and then you ship it to somebody who ain't friends with the US. So they want to keep all of that technology out of enemies' hands. And they just go, yeah, as a civilian, you don't need it. There's no purpose for you to have it, and therefore you don't. And that falls under what's called the ITAR restrictions.
Okay, right, yep. So the main ones that we're going to be talking about, obviously, for the shooter and hunter, is the digital night vision?
Yes, so the digital night vision and then the thermal. Just to finish off on the digital, I mentioned that you have to use an IR Illuminator. So an IR Illuminator is nothing else than a normal flashlight, but the LED or the bulb in this case LED these days, the LED in that flashlight only emits near infrared wavelengths or light, which the human eye can't see. And there's an important difference between what's called an 850 and a 940. So the 850 nm stands for nanometers. That's the wavelength. And then we have a 940 nanometer wavelength. The 850 is more recognizable by the digital night vision devices than the 940 at the same power output. So what that means is that the 850 will give you a longer range or longer distance to shoot than the 940, because you just need so much more power for the 940 and they tend to not be available or not yet on the market. Now, the downside on the 850 is that wavelength will lighten up the bulb and the objective lens of the flashlight. So if you look into the flashlight, the whole glass part would be shining red. You wouldn't see any light, and if you hold it against the wall, you wouldn't see anything, and neither do the animals, but you can see the red bulb. So what I found at very short distance, I'm talking like 20, 30 meters to a pig, they'll notice when you turn it on, and they're not liking it. If you shoot anything under 100, 150, and you don't want to shoot further, and that's your limit, you can use the 940, where only the LED itself shows red. So it's so tiny that there's no way they're going to know. So you can get really, really close, turn it on, and not be worried about it. But if you want to shoot beyond that, you have to have an 850. You just have to be aware that you want to dim the light slowly up or bring the light slowly onto target so they don't get scared by suddenly seeing this red light or this red bulb popping up at 20 meters distance, which might get them going.
Right. Definitely very interesting. What about, so when you obviously were shooting, tell us about the two different devices. So obviously you've got the Illuminator, which sends out that, I'm guessing that infrared signal or beam, whatever you would like to call it. So then what's the instrument that's actually capturing that? Like capturing the image that we can actually see? Is it just is it a scope? Is it a combined together? Is it a display that's coming in? Let's say we're on a quad or something, and we've got a Illuminator, and then we've got like a 5 or 6 inch display. Like, how does that work? Yeah.
Okay, so think of it like this. Think of it when you have a digital night vision scope, right? Such as the DJX from Pulsar or the ATN Excite 4K or something like that. It's basically, in essence, a scope, right? If you were to compare it to a day, or sorry, let me start over with that one. But so if you have your day scope and you were to attach a normal torch to go spotlighting at night, right? Now switching to digital night vision, you would have a digital night vision scope, and you would have the torch on top, but the torch would only emit that infrared light, which you can't see, but the scope itself can see. You can obviously also use that in combination with a digital night vision monocle. It would be the same. Does it make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So what do people generally use? I mean, actually, let's go first off this question. I mean, why should we use night vision? What's the differences between night vision? Okay, we spoke about that, night vision and thermal. I mean, is it so someone comes to buy something? Because again, years ago, I mean, we saw a couple of this is probably only maybe 3 years ago, 2 to 3 years ago. I'm not going to mention brands, but some of them that we saw that were quite expensive. You know, you really couldn't tell. These were more thermal, obviously. You really couldn't tell what was in front of you at 30 meters, and I guess they were used for more of a deer tracking type situation at night, or at least if you're maybe hunting at night or spotlighting and you happen to want to track, you could use these items. But you know, there was a lot of a difference in what you could actually see and what you could actually make out. So I guess, what should we be using? What's coming these days? Is thermal still as popular? Is it definitely using IR Illuminators? Where are we at?
Okay, so let's just tick off thermal, right, and then combine it all together. So thermal vision works very similar to digital night vision, where from a technology perspective, where you have a sensor, a processor, and then your screen, right? So that's pretty much the same. The difference is that the sensor senses thermal radiation, so heat signature. So it's a little bit like Eraser, like that kind of, or Predator from the movies, that kind of vision. So it's heat. It's not light as we understand it. It's still a radiation or a wavelength, but we feel it as heat. So any object will emit this thermal radiation, and we can, through these thermal devices, can just see that heat, if that makes sense. So what it means for us is, one, we can tell the difference instantly between a living thing and not living things like trees, rocks, grass, or whatever you want. Everything has a temperature, but the temperature difference is basically what we bank on. We can use it in total darkness, and it's absolutely invisible because we don't shine any light out. We are just receiving and analyzing what comes in. Now, to make that happen, in those thermal devices, you have to use a material as the lens, which is called germanium. And germanium is a rare earth, and it's extremely expensive. And so that is one of the biggest reasons why thermal devices are way more expensive, is because we have to pay for that rare earth material to make the lens. Now, to come to your question, the challenge with thermal versus digital night vision when it comes to detection, recognition, and identification of targets is that, in one sentence, you would need a very, very expensive thermal to get the same distance in terms of identification than you could do with $1,000 digital night vision. And the reason is because you see the heat of the animal. So you only get the shape. You don't get the contrast. You don't get, well, you do, but you have to be really close, or it has to be a really expensive thermal. So on the flip side, digital night vision works in a gray to black scale, white to black scale, or green scale. It doesn't really matter, but it's in one or two color schemes, versus thermal can be in different color schemes, gives you a little bit more information, but it really makes the animals pop, if that makes sense.
Yeah, because I know a lot of people will probably be sitting here, and I saw some of this stuff, probably a couple of years ago, and not making, out what it actually was. And I thought it'd be just, I'm sure a lot of people that will listen to the show will say, well, you absolutely have to identify your target before you actually pull the trigger. That's the most important thing, especially if the farmer has stock. But I've seen some of the digital, as a night vision, as you've said, if you get some quite good stuff, you can't even, like I've seen a guy, I think he had one on like a quad and so forth, and had on top of the quad, I think the IR was on top of the quad, and whatever it was, might have been a built-in unit, but it came down to a little LCD screen, and even at distance, you could, clearly, I think he was shooting rabbits at one stage, and I think you could obviously clearly tell they were rabbits at that distance, which is fantastic, whereas, years ago, you saw the thermal, a big blob, and anyone taking a shot at that type of stuff would just be a crazy thing to do.
Yeah, you wouldn't know where the head is. Yeah, I completely agree. So how it works is, or how I advise my customers is, spend as much money as you can on a thermal monocular, because if you know the animal is where it is, you can always go closer, either with a red light torch or with a digital night vision scope, and find out exactly what it is at 200-300 meters, right? If I want to know 100% at 300 meters with a thermal scope what animal I'm looking at, unless I've seen it move and I know how it moves and I have experience, you're looking at 5,000 plus terms of dollars.
Yeah.
So the cheapest way is get a thermal monocular, see what's there, see that something is there, and if you can't exactly tell what it is, get closer and use red light or digital night vision, because it gives you for the price the best distance to 100% identify what it is. I went out with a hunter. He used thermal. I used digital night vision. And he always said, I only will take the shot when I can see the ears of the animal. By that time, I'm so close that I'm 100% sure it's not a cow or anything stock-wise. It's a pig, for argument's sake, right? And we are in this field, and the pigs are there. I use my digital night vision, and I could tell 200 meters out they're pigs. I can see them. They're black pigs. They're black and white pigs. I could definitely make them out. And he's like, oh, we got to get closer. We got to get closer. And his scope was twice the price of mine. And I said, mate, look through mine. Just look through mine, confirm, and then we can, take the shot. In the end, he couldn't be convinced. He needed to get close. He needed to see the ears through the thermal. And I think we took the shots at 50 meters.
Yeah,
successful.
right.
But, yeah.
I mean, good on him. I like that too, that people, even if you can tell, it's always, good to get close, I guess, to put someone's mind at ease. I think that's a pretty good thing as well, even though you're 100% right. Sometimes people can't be convinced, can they? And I guess when it comes to firearms, it makes sense.
Oh, mate, he was doing the right thing, right? You got to remember, you shoot somebody's stock, you ain't coming back.
Exactly.
And he was a professional culler. It was his business, and word spreads really quickly from one farm to another. So there was no way in hell he was going to take a shot if he wasn't 100% convinced, and basically almost hears them. So, he's done the right thing, right? And, well, we got closer, so we got more of them.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll go to a break first, but I've got some very good questions about, I guess why we should use night vision, especially at night when walking around. But Bastian, I want to talk about, the benefits of being out there with, as you said, digital night vision. So I like to shoot rabbits occasionally. I shoot them during the day. I like to long range shoot them. But there's certain parts of coming down this mountain, this property that I do go to, where I know they like to congregate on the side of the road, but it's very difficult once it gets dark to get up there, because during the daylight, they obviously see you, they shoot back into the grass, they're pretty much gone. So when I'm obviously walking up on them, if I'm using some sort of digital night vision, what can those animals actually see? They might be able to hear me coming up on the road, they might hear me walking over some rocks and so forth. So can they actually see, like especially rabbits and so forth, and those smaller game animals like foxes, will they actually see like the IR Illuminator, or pretty much not at all? And is that the benefit of night vision? Obviously to get closer so they don't know you're there, so you can obviously shoot them?
All right, there's a couple of things to that. First thing around the Illuminator, if you use the 850, they'll be able to see it, depending on how close you want to get. The 940 would be your choice, right? With the 940, you can basically say, no, they're not going to see you. Thermal, they're also not going to see you at all. The big thing about nighttime hunting is wind. So you can be as close as 20 meters to a mob of pigs that are feeding. They're so loud, so they're never going to hear you coming. But if they get your scent 300 meters out, you never see them, right? So if you just have to make sure you come from the right direction, from downwind, and you get real close and personal. That's basically that's what it comes down to. The big benefit is you're gonna get the first shot. It's a 100% first shot hit guarantee. Well, if you're a bad shot, then I don't guarantee for anything. But if you can hit your target, then you're good to go. The first one is yours. Anything after that is, free game. But that said, even after the first shot, they tend to not move as much as during the day, where they actually make you out. They just heard a loud noise, and one of their mates is gone or not responsive anymore. And they might hop or they might run, but they're not going to run or hop as far as during the day. And then they start feeding again most of the time. So you just keep your cool. You shoot one, they run away. You make your way back, or you take the second shot from there if the distance is still okay. And you just keep on doing that. Eventually, they get the gist and bugger off. But you tend to get multiplier on your kills when you do it at night.
Yeah, when you were talking about the 850, 940 Illuminators, does this all rely on, again, distance? Depends on the quality of Illuminator that you get. Is there better Illuminators than others? Obviously, ones that are much more powerful, get much more distance, etc.?
Oh, absolutely. And I've been out hunting the other week and testing products, and I was so stoked to see this new product hit the market. So let me step back. In general, absolutely, right? The more powerful your illuminator, the greater the distance you can shoot. And traditionally, the 940, the most powerful 940, would get you to that 150 mark, right? Anything beyond that would be an 850, and they would get you to about 300 just, right? Which is a long way at night. Like, you don't have to shoot 300 meters. You can walk up generally. The only exception are dogs, what I've found, because they move through the countryside so quickly. They've got a 30-second window to take the shot unless you hit them in. And for that, you need that distance. Now, that was the limiting factor, right? The digital night vision scope, generally, with the quality of resolution, would be able to shoot beyond, but you are limited by the amount of light or infrared you can generate at the point of impact. Now, that has changed since this new Illuminator came out. It's called the Sniper Hawk Coyote Cannon. And it is a cannon, mate. It is a monster of a flashlight. It has interchangeable LEDs, so you can change different colors. But the 850 IR LED generates, and it says, and I thought, oh, this is bullshit. It says you can see up to a mile. So talking 1.6 kilometers. And I'm like, that's unheard of. That's never, ever. And I took it out, and shit you not, I could not find a spot on the property where I had a clear line of sight beyond 800 meters. And at 800, I was still seeing like daylight. It was so impressive. Now, downside is that anything close up 20, 30 meters is a little bit overpowering. The next thing is it's a big thing. It has a bit of weight to it, obviously. When you see the imagery, you know why. And the last thing is you're talking $800 retail, right, for the torch. So it only becomes really useful for people that do want to go that extra distance, do have to go that extra distance. But now with that infrared illuminator, the limiting factor currently is the scope itself. That you need enough resolution at that distance to tell what it is number one. Number two, there's no way in hell you're going to see a deer at 500 meters by looking through the scope in black and white or in a green scale, unless you have a deer running through in the open field. You won't be able to spot the animal. So it basically then comes back full circle to the thermal devices or thermal monocle, which will tell you that something is in the distance and even maybe at 500 meters. And then you swap to your digital night vision scope with the cannon, with the Coyote cannon, and you light it up.
So I was going to say too, like, I mean, when you're obviously out there, you know, these things obviously require power. I mean, how they generally power, what's the run time? I mean, you know, people often go on hunts, maybe they don't have access to places to be able to charge and things like that. Are they just USB powered? Are they changeable? Because I know probably a lot of people would probably want, you know, changeable batteries that way. You know, there's a lot of companies out there bringing out torches and so forth that are just, you know, USB powered, and eventually those batteries sort of go bad after a while. So what's the run time? How are we powering them, and what sort of juice do they need?
Right. Okay, so we got to differentiate internal batteries that you can't take out, and the device is not going to work if the power goes out, and you basically have to charge it before you can use it again. You then have changeable or interchangeable batteries or battery packs. Sometimes they're proprietary batteries, so you have to buy the right battery for the right device from the right brand, or at best case, you can use a CR123 or other batteries, keeping in mind you probably want to go down the rechargeable route, because a CR123 in, for example, the Fleur Bridge will last an hour and a half. So if I go hunting over a weekend at $9 a pop per battery, you're talking hundreds or at least $100 in batteries. So you got to go rechargeable, and highly recommend always to go high power rechargeable lithium batteries when it comes to normal changeable batteries. And then the last thing is the usage of external battery packs. So what I find going out with these devices is that the bottom end of the spectrum in terms of thermal devices, you have internal batteries. Also, from a digital night vision scope perspective, some have proprietary batteries like the Pulsar Digex. The ATN-X side has an internal battery as an example. But what I tend to do is whenever it's an internal, I'll have an external battery pack with me. So when I'm out bush, and the batteries nowadays from anything you buy new now is at the very least 4 hours, which gets you, if you go all night, through half the night. If you always turn it off and turn it on again, you might get 6-7 hours out of it, but you won't get through an entire night. So I always carry an external battery pack, and that can be any USB port battery pack in my pocket. And whenever I don't use it for a while, I plug it in. It becomes a little bit more difficult when you're talking scopes rather than monocles, because you can put those in a backpack or in a pocket. The scope, what I do there is I mount the external battery pack on my rifle stock, on obviously the other side where my cheek isn't on. And you can buy really cheap bags basically for that. And then I run a cable to the scope and plug that in. But these days, to be honest, the ATN-X side has an 18-hour battery life. That never runs out. And so I always, it works throughout the night. Now, if you're on a backpack hunt, you'll need some type of either a bigger battery, but that means weight, or you need a little bit of a solar panel that powers up your external battery pack, which then in turn charges any of your devices. So yes, it becomes a little bit more, I guess, organizational work. You got to keep in mind that at some point you need power, and you just need to think through what suits you best. When it comes to buying devices, look, the best is if you have interchangeable batteries that aren't proprietary, because then you don't rely on, $80-$70 worth of battery packs to buy. The next one down is interchangeable, so you can buy a few, so you don't ever get in a position where you're about to take the shot and then the battery fails, and a few seconds later, by the time you have the new battery in, the shot just doesn't happen anymore. And then the last is obviously the least preferred is internal batteries in general, and one factor there is eventual failure. So any battery, internal or external, will eventually fail after a certain amount of recharges, and you can take that risk away by having an external or interchangeable battery. So, however, that said, so far I haven't had a single battery failure on any of the products that I've sold. It doesn't happen very often at all. And, if they hold up to 10,000 rechargeable cycles, that's a lot. That's a lot of hunting. By then, the technology is so advanced that you want to sell it anyway.
What about when you talk about social media and, like, obviously people want to, they love that sort of getting it on camera. Can these things record, or what's the best way to record, video if they want to use it, part of their hunting videos or whatever?
Yeah, there's a big difference, actually. So the entry-level devices most likely will not be able to record. So the very, very entry ones. And even if they were able to record, the pixelation would be horrific and nobody would want to watch it anyway. And then you go up the line to the medium range, I guess, the better products. What you'll find is they often record on your phone. So they Wi-Fi to your phone. So they don't have internal capacity to record on the device, but they Wi-Fi to your phone and then record on your phone. Now that becomes annoying because you're sitting out there in the bush and you kind of have to work with the phone and have to work with the monocle, and it's just something I recommend. If you want footage, don't go down that route. It's just a pain in the bum, and you're there to hunt and capture the experience and not try to fiddle around with technology. Then another option, and then if you continue to go up, is the device records the footage internally. Some will not record audio. For some people, that doesn't matter because they overlay their own music or their own soundtrack or whatever. But look, and this is me personally, I love to hear the sound, the whispering to your mate, going, oh yeah, I got him, I'm ready, you ready? You know, all this intensive, that's when you get the goosebumps, right? And then you hear the shot and you might hear the pig squeal or whatever. Or you might not. But for me, that's what I love, and I love seeing and experiencing. So you got to pay attention to the product information of the product, or just ask from whomever you buy if audio is being recorded, and if it is recorded on the device. So the top of the line equipment will all record on the device and sound, but yeah, just make sure. And then you can, download it onto your computer, onto your phone, and then share it with your friends, to the point where some of the pulsar range connects to your phone and you can live stream. So, I mean, here in Australia, it's not that usable because we tend to hunt in areas where there isn't much reception. But if you were to have a 4G tower, around your property, you could technically upload it live to Facebook as you hunt and start shooting the deer or whatever prey.
I want to talk about in a minute, though, just about like brands and budgets and pricings and those sort of things. Not pricings, but just generally brands and what we need to spend. But is it, when we're using the digital night vision or night vision in general, I mean, is this something I've got to take off throughout the day? I mean, are these able to be used during the day as well as, say, a normal scope? How does that generally work? Because, some people might not want to take it off. Some people are happy to, take them off. And also, how do we mount them to the rifles? There's specific rings, there's specific mounting options that you need to use?
Yeah, all right. So to your first question, traditional night vision is useless during the day. You can't use it. Okay, so it's only usable for nighttime. Digital night vision can be used during the day and the night, and thermal can be used during the day and the night. However, thermal specifically has limitations. So it works phenomenal during rainy days and foggy days because everything kind of has the same temperature. So all the objects out there in the fields and woods have the somewhat same temperature because of the rain. And anything living really stands out. So that's awesome. Super helpful. So superior to the digital night vision. However, if you're in the outback, and especially in the Queensland outback, and every rock is like 60 degrees hot and every tree stump is like 50 degrees hot, you're going to have difficulties seeing popping out animals between all these hot objects. And basically what you rely on is movement. So you're looking for anything that moves rather than anything that's hot. So that's pretty much the limiting factor. And then thermal, as the night goes on, especially in the early morning, as the sun is just about to rise and you hit the bottom temperatures throughout the day, you get the biggest difference between heat from animals and the coldness of the ground. And that gives you the best picture quality as such and experience. So then, now coming to your question around mounting. Yeah, mounting is a thing. Mounting is also something that you just need to be aware of. And So you have different options to mount these scopes, right, onto your firearm. So we got two, I call it 2.5 options. One is a rail attachment. So what it is, it's basically 2 or 3 screws that are screwed into the device, and then some type of rail mechanism comes down, and normally they get attached to a Picatinny rail. Now, one of my rifles, I have a Steel Action 308, German gun, obviously. Had to buy one. They have integrated Picatinny bases on the action, but it's not a connected Picatinny rail. And so some of the thermals, they don't have enough grip on that small piece of Picatinny base, and they need a full-length Picatinny rail. So that's just something to keep in mind. If you don't have a full-length Picatinny rail, make sure before you buy it, and assuming you don't want one, make sure that your night vision or thermal scope can attach to your base of the action. The other option is rings. And so some of the scopes, especially the newer ones, the Thermion from Pulsar, the TJX, they all look like scopes, right? They have the shape of a scope, and from the distance, you'll be like, oh, that's a scope. But therefore, they have, in this case, a 30 mil tube, which means you need 30 mil rings. And then it's just like any other scope, right? You just mount them as you normally do. You just need to make sure that your 30 mil rings fit your base on the action, and you're good to go. Now, what I personally do and what I recommend is, if you happen to have the option for quick release rings or quick release rail, take it. Because what I do is, I like my day scope, right? And most of us have spent a lot of money to get that really nice day scope. So why would I put a digital night vision scope on it, use that during the day, when I got a real nice day scope that just gives me better clarity in the very first place? Assuming I don't want to record my shots, right? Because normal day scope can't do that. What I do is I go out just before dawn. Just before the sun goes down, and I sit at a dam, right? And I wait as the sun goes down with my day scope mounted. And then when the sun is gone, or just about to, then I just grab my digital night vision or thermal scope out of the backpack. And within 30 seconds, I'm ready to roll. I don't need to move, and I can just continue sitting there, and I can just see all the animals come in just as the sun goes down, and even after that. Where traditionally with my day scope, I either would have to change guns, which normally I don't carry 2 guns. I carry enough gadgets. So I would probably leave, have dinner, come back out, and I would have missed that crucial time where the first lot of deer and pigs and everything else comes out to drink.
Yeah. Okay. Right. Yep. All right, Bastian. Now I guess the wallet burning question. How much do we need to spend? I mean, realistically, because people don't want to be disappointed, buying something that might be, a certain price, thinking they're getting something that should be better, and they're not happy with it. So what do they realistically need to be spending? What are the brands? Where's the technology at? And what do they need to spend?
All right, heaps of questions. All right, let's start with the gear. So when you look at budget, right, you have a small budget and you just want to really make a difference to your hunting and really improve your hunting, what should you spend your money on, right? And so when I have customers like that, I basically tell them, this is the setup that I would run, right? And it gets you 70% there, to compare to spending whatever you can, which gets you to 100%, for argument's sake. So when you walk or stalk, what you want to do is you want to have a red light headlamp, right? A small little headlamp. Just make sure it's red light, because animals tend to not react that much to red light. So that enables you to move at night in, I guess, semi-darkness, right? You can see, you can walk, and you might not get as close to animals, but you can freely walk around and at least get into position where you want to be without turning on a torch or a flashlight or something. The next thing is you mount a red light torch onto your day scope. Again, if you turn on and you're careful on how you turn on that flashlight and bring it onto a target, you can get really close, and animals tend to not be spooked by a red light unless they've been shot at with red light previously, which a lot of people are not using red light. So there's a very, very good chance for you to get really close, use the red light, and use your day scope, right? And so far, you would have spent, 20, $30 if you buy it from like aliexpress.com.au out of China. Obviously, you can go high end and buy a $200 or a little bit even above that red light torch, red light scope torch. But if budget is a thing, you spend under $50 and you got those two pieces. The next thing is where you're going to put your money. You're going to put as much money as you can afford into the best thermal monocular with the greatest zoom. And this is important because you're walking. You don't need field of view. You need distance, because field of view and distance are trade-offs. You have a lot of field of view, you're not going to get the distance. So when you're walking, you don't want to be walking everywhere. So you want the distance, and then you sneak up on the prey. So that's where you're going to spend your money. Now, the entry starts at about $1,500. Anything under $1,500 is basically a toy. Don't bother. Anything above $1,500 is where things start and where things make a huge difference. So put your money in that. And for some, that's a day scope, right? It's not $4,000, $3,000, $10,000 as it used to be. The entry level is now $1,500 and above. And any dollar you can put into that to get it above $1,500 is well spent. And the last thing is a monopod or a bipod or tripod. Again, you can buy them for $50 straight out of China. And just so you have a rest, so that you're able to take that first 100% shot. And then after that, you have somewhat of a stable platform to take any follow-up shots on the running animals, right? Or you just wait, and you don't have to hold up your rifle. Now, if you're a real good shot, because you have to remember you have extra weight. With that torch on top of the scope already, it's going to get heavy, front heavy. So if you can have that, great. If you can't afford it, don't bother. Find the next tree or kneel or, train to shoot standing. When it comes to cars, it's only different when you're in a car. In a car, you want the maximum field of view that you can have. And the reason is, imagine you look through binoculars while driving. You're going to get seasick. So the same thing with thermal. If you have a high magnification, just like binoculars, you're going to get seasick. So you want to have a wide field of view so you can cover a great distance and look through it while driving. Otherwise, you have to drive, stop, and scan in between. Now, that's the budget. So altogether, $1,700, very well spent. And that will just, it will make such a difference.
Just one question. Sorry if I've got this wrong. When you say monocular, is that like the scope actually connected to the gun, or is that something we're holding separately and we've also got something on top of the gun, or have I just got this totally wrong?
No, all right. Sorry, I never really explained that. So you basically have 3 or 4 different types of devices, right? You have binoculars, as everybody will know, day binoculars, right? They also come in a digital night vision or a thermal version. And then you have monoculars, so only for one eye. Again, come in all variations or in all different technology types. Then you have monoculars that are so small that you can mount them on a helmet. That's what I personally use to move around. So I don't have to hold it up. I can just constantly move and scan. And then you have scopes, like the normal rifle scope. So when we talk about small budget, right, what I suggest is you need something to move along within the forest, and you want to do that without normal daylight torch. So instead, you use a red light headlamp. Costs you nothing or very little. Will make a big difference. You'll be able to walk at night. Animals don't get spooked. So then, where you want to spend all your money is a thermal monocular, and this is important. A monocular is basically, think of it as binoculars, but one tube instead of two, right? So you bring it up to your eye, and you look through it. You basically set it onto your eye socket, and you look through it, and you scan. And when you're done scanning, you either put it in your pocket or it just dangles down your neck because it has a neck strap. So what you do is you walk with that thermal. You find an animal. You might not be able to tell what it is, but you know there is one. And if it moves, most of the time, you can tell what it is based on how it moves, right? So that's where you want to spend all your money. Anything usable will start at $1,500. So that's going to be probably the Nitec range, Australian brand. So put your money there, and any dollar then in addition you can put into that to get it to maybe $2,000 is going to be making all the difference in the world. Okay? Then when you've found something and you know, oh yeah, this is probably a pig, or I want to have a look, that's when you bring up your normal rifle with your day scope, but you put a red light torch on top of it. And this is important. If you use a daytime torch, you probably will spook the animal. So it doesn't give you this first shot where you have all the time in the world to make a real good shot. And so take a red light torch, preferably dimmable, so you can dim slowly up the intensity to until you're sure what it is and you verified, yep, 100%, it's a pig. I'm going to take the shot, instead of putting it at full beam, at full power, and blind it. Right? Even red light will, at some intensity, annoy. It's more an annoyance to them, so they start buggering off. So you want to start it slow. If you don't have a dimmable, the trick, and this is worth $1 million. This tip is bring the light or the beam slowly onto the animal. Don't just put it on it. Bring it from the outside in, and only as far as you need to. And then you confirm, okay, and then you slowly bring it over the animal so you get the crosshairs on and you take your shot. If you have a couple $50 spare, buy yourself a monopod, a bipod, or a tripod. Now, that will help you to get that first shot 100% right, and then follow-up shots will be relatively smooth because you're already on somewhat of a stable platform. Now, especially now when you one thing I forgot to say about the thermal monocular. It's important to try to buy one with as much, it's called base magnification, so the zoom that you can afford, because it saves you a lot of walking. You know there is an animal in the distance, but you don't know what it is. Well, what does it mean? It means I have to walk over there. Ah, crap, it's a rock. I just walked 200 meters for nothing. So it saves you a lot of walking if you can tell what it is from where you are. Again, pay as much as you can afford. It will be of value to you and save you from walking kilometers. Now, the difference, though, is if you're on a car, the zoom is going to become a problem, or the zoom is going to become a problem.
because with higher zoom becomes a smaller field of view. Just like if you look through a normal telescope, right? If you have it on the power of 2, you can see everything, right? All the way, 100 meters from one end to the other. But once you zoom up to 25, you can barely see, the entire target, for argument's sake. So with monocles, it's the same thing. If you imagine driving during the day with binoculars at 8 power on your eyes, you're going to get seasick. And monoculars, thermal monoculars at night, it's the same thing. It's basically works very similar. So you want a wide field view so you don't get seasick, and or you can actually see something and not just bouncing around, no, an image bouncing around. Even if there is an animal, it'll be all over the shop and you won't be even recognizing it as an animal. So altogether, this setup, costs like maybe $1,600 if you're clever about it and you buy stuff off eBay and AliExpress.com.au, and you're good to go. And it gives you 60-70% of the success someone would get if they spend $10,000, $15,000, $20,000. So
it's interesting, isn't it? Because I wouldn't have even thought about that before. I'm used to the ones, at least, again, this is the purpose of, as we were discussing earlier, doing this show, because I would never have thought, okay, we ascertain where the target is first with the monocular. That might be just hanging around our neck, or it could be on a helmet, or whatever it is. And then obviously from there, once we know where the animal is, then we turn a red light torch onto the gun and then shoot from there. I just thought, it's weird, like I never would have thought that before. I've never even seen that. Most people compare the night vision to, I'm looking through the scope, I can see the animal there, and then bang, which obviously you can do as well. But I didn't think this would be sort of a popular way to go about it, but it seems that it is.
Oh, look, it's the way to go if you have a budget, and then we can talk about what happens if you don't have a budget. So what you want to do there is, assuming you're walking and stalking, what you do is you get yourself a thermal helmet mountable monocle, and I recommend the Infiray Mini MH25. It's the top of the line, the best resolution that we can get here in Australia. And what it does, basically, it gives you your hands free. You don't have to bring up a monocular to your eye. It's mounted to the helmet and it sits in front of your eye permanently. Imagine the imagery you see from Hollywood movies when they go, we're going dark, and they put down their night vision from the helmet.
Yeah.
That's it. That's where the name came from for my website, but that's that scene, right? So you have that hands-free. You can walk around in complete darkness because it's thermal. It doesn't need an infrared light or anything else. You just walk. They'll never hear you or see you coming. And you're not walking into bushes and stuff, which is sort of fall down cliffs. So then, assumingly, you see something in the distance, you go, okay, cool. I know there's something there. The helmet-mounted monoculars generally have an extreme wide field of view. Actually, they have a 1-power magnification, which means they are not different to your eyes. Because if they would, you would fall over things. Because, it's like walking with binoculars in front of you and trying to walk through a forest. It's not going to work. So they are exactly like your eyes, so you can see your hands in front of it. You can work, you can walk, and walking into things. But the downside is that you don't get that distance. So something is up 200 meters down there, but you have no idea what it is or further. So that's when you need your high-end thermal monocular, right? And you can go, or binocular. So the binocular I recommend is the Pulsar Echolate 2 with an integrated laser rangefinder. Now that's the top of the line. You're talking 10 grand just for that. And it tells you the distance to the target. So you can laser rangefind it. And it's thermal. So with that thing, at 500, 600, 700 meters, I know what I'm looking at. And I can work out the distance. So either I take the shot from where I am and I know my shot placement, or I'll start walking because I know it's too far for my shooting. So after that, you're now at the point where, okay, I know there's a deer. It's 500 meters away. I can get there because I got helmet-mounted monocular, and I verified the distance, and I know what it is. So I'm going to go a little closer. So I keep walking to like 250 meters, right? And then I pull up my gun. And on my gun, I would either have a Thermion XP50 thermal scope or the Infrared Ricoh RH50. They're very comparable. One is Pulsar, which is a European brand, or Infrared, which is a Chinese brand. Don't ditch the Chinese. They probably made the phones that we're using and the computers we're using and the servers. So there's some good stuff coming out of China. I understand, obviously, politically, it's a bit no at the moment, but nevertheless, they are very comparable. And so I would have that on my rifle. And because I already know what it is, now I just need to be close enough to tell where the head is, where the shoulders are, so I can get a real good shot placement. And with a thermal, I have the advantage that even if there's grass or bushes in the way, unless it's thick bushes, right, light bushes, I can still easily make them out. And I don't have to swap between the monocular to look, okay, it's between two trees to the left of a pond, and then bring up a night vision device where I go, okay, there's the two trees, there's the pond, somewhere in between there, I'm looking for a deer shape. No, with a thermal, it just stands out, and I can take that shot. Now, I combine that with a Primos Gen 3 tripod. I personally use one. I got to love them. They're lightweight. They expand by pushing a button. One button, so I don't have to undo every single leg to the right height. I just push a button, they come down, they spread out, and whenever I release the button, the tripod goes solid. So I can easily, in a second or two, bring that into place, put my gun on it, and I'm ready to shoot. I combine that with a clamp that holds my rifle, so I don't have to hold my rifle. And then I can easily just sit it in my shoulder. And because sometimes I sit at a dam for hours and I don't want to hold my rifle and it annoys me on my knees or leaned against the chair. It's all not good practice. So I just clamp it into that on the tripod and it sits there like a torrent and I'm ready to roll. And look, that setup, you're beyond $20,000.
Man, it seems like the sky's the limit when we start talking about night vision.
Yeah, mate. Yeah, it is. Important. Look, the big takeaway is it doesn't have to be. Spend the money at the right thing that gives you the most value for your type of hunting. And that's so important. And that's why good advice in this field, because it is complex, right? A lot of people struggle with this. And it takes a long time to learn and figure out what works and what doesn't. You can spend $10,000 on a device and it's absolutely useless to you because it might, have a minimum power or magnification of 5, but you use it in a forest where your maximum distance is 70 meters. It's useless. You would throw it away, right? So you got to spend the money on the right thing that suits your style of hunting. Just like you buy a sporter lightweight rifle when you walk a lot, but not when you want to shoot a target at a target range at 1,000 meters, right?
Exactly.
Just like that. You got to get the right equipment to do the right job. And that all comes down to either you smarten up and reading a lot and watching a lot of videos, or ask the right guys to give you the right advice.
Perfect. So, but if people want to, because again, my mind's a bit blown because, as I said, I wasn't even sure, from before, where people were mounting, red torches on their thing and using the monocle to spot game. So it's certainly something different than I was even used to. So my mind's blown as well. So if people want to get in contact with you, first off, I guess tell us about the website. Where can they find you if they want to buy stuff? But most importantly, which is obviously they've heard this show, but they want to get advice about what's the best thing for what they need for what their use actually is going to be. How do they get in contact with you, etc.?
Yeah, look, the best way is to go to the website, goingdark.com.au. On there are all my contact details. So phone number, email address. There's also a little button in the bottom right corner for instant chat. So that goes straight onto my mobile phone. If I am just not having my phone in my pocket or I'm on a call or something, it'll prompt you to leave your details. I will always get back to you as soon as I possibly can. Absolutely within the day, but normally within minutes. So just leave your contact details in there, and I'll get in touch with you, and then we'll have a chat. Normally I do it via phone just because the amount of information I need to make the right advice is quite a bit. So I'll be asking about where do you hunt, what's the climate, obviously what's the budget, but do you hunt on open fields? Do you hunt in the forest? Do you hunt small critters? At what distance do you generally shoot them? So all these data points will eventually make up my advice. And then I'll be saying, look, this product from this brand or this product from this brand, they're very similar. The budget might be slightly different, but this is the minimum that you need. And so anything below that is not going to satisfy you, and anything above that might neither, right? It doesn't necessarily mean you can go above and beyond. It might not add any value to you. You better be off spending the money somewhere else.
Mate, where do you see the, future before we finish off the future? I mean, it's obviously come quite a long way over the last 3 to 5 years, especially in technology, in how much, our money buys us. So where do you see sort of the future of the technology going forward?
Yeah, it's quite interesting. So what we've seen in the past is the prices for thermal specifically have come down dramatically. And that's the reason for that is that the sensors that sit behind that germanium rare earth becoming smaller and smaller and smaller. And what that means is that we need less lens size to do the same job, right? Because the sensor is getting smaller, so the lens can get smaller. So therefore, in consequence, the production costs become smaller, and therefore they become cheaper and more available. So $1,500 these days would be something that 2 years ago was at least twice the price, if not more. So that's going to continue. We're now down to 17 micron sensors, from 17 down to 12, the newest one, and I expect that keeps on going as the technology advances. The next thing is we have more sensitive sensors, so sensitive to differences in heat, which gives you just a better clarity in the picture, in the contrast. The pixels, just like your TV, right? Remember the good old TV, and now we have, HD and Ultra HD and 4K and 8K. Just like that, thermal and digital night vision will improve from a pixels perspective. There is such a thing as HD thermals, but they're $50,000. I can get you one if you got the money, but realistically, unless you really want it for commercial videoing or something like that, making movies, it's probably not going to be in anybody's budget. But give it, 5 years and everybody's going to run around with one. Longer battery life. The improvements in battery life in general means also that on any of these devices have longer and longer battery life, which makes the whole charging less of a pain. We now have the first color digital night vision called the Psionics Aurora, and that is just the first one. So I expect that a lot of digital night vision scopes eventually will also change to color mode at night. So daytime and nighttime is going to be the same. So you can now then pick out that black pig with black background. You be able to a lot more able to see that. You're right. Grass is going to be green instead of gray and all these things. So that's going to be awesome. Potentially, we might see a fusion of digital night vision and thermal, where you do have that good resolution from the digital night vision and overlay a thermal image on top of that to really make the animal pop. but have the detail on the image to know that it's deer, right? But companies have tried this, and there are a few that came out with something, but nobody really broke through yet. And the last thing, which I'm quite excited about, is artificial animal recognition. So I actually worked with a company, Green Room Robotics, here in Australia together, and we developed a software and an artificial intelligence that can identify animals based on the heat signature, and like so much better than humans can. And so a company called Ninox here in Brisbane, they have a bunch of drones, big drones, like really expensive drones, and they fly for the government. They fly surveys and scanning areas at night to assess how many feral deer, feral pigs are on the land, to then pinpoint their mitigation efforts. And that was great work. And I foresee that if the computer chips get better, because you need a lot of computing power, and that's a limiting factor at the moment. Once that gets better, we might see that integrated into our scopes. So our scopes will verify with us, or for us almost, what you're shooting at. Obviously, trust it, make sure you show yourself, but at some point they will probably outperform us. So a bright future ahead, but the takeaway, everything is going to get cheaper. But at some point, you got to buy it and use it. And then, next time you buy a new device, it's going to be even better.
Yeah, absolutely. What about where do you want to take your business moving forward anyway in regards to night vision and so forth?
Yeah, look, we stand for customer service, right? So I do things like I upgrade all the software to the latest firmware. So when you get it, it's ready to go. The only exception is if I don't get to touch it. So if it comes straight from distributor to you as the end consumer, because you need it immediately for whatever reason. But other than that, it's the customer service side that we're working on. And the other one is we're going to develop a lot of educational content, just like this podcast, right? So there'll be a lot of video content coming out. There'll be a lot of product reviews coming out that are standardized, so we can actually compare product one to another. And there's really exciting stuff coming, so stay tuned for that. And then what I would love to implement is a try before you buy. I mean, again, people that never used thermal or night vision before, they can't, it's hard for them to grasp how much of a difference it makes, and if they actually can use it in their hunting experience. So I would love to implement a try before you buy rental, where let's say you want to use, and there's a $5,000 for argument's sake thermal monocular you want to potentially buy. You pay me for a week's worth of rent, but you decide to buy it. Well, I just you get a discount in the amount of the rental price. If you don't like it, well, you had it for a week, you went out for hunting, for a week hunting, and you had a great time, and so be it. So a rental unit or rental units on offer. And then the last thing is, because of the rental units and because we test a lot of products, soon we'll start offering demo and rental units, and they're going to be at phenomenal prices. So if you're on a budget and you really want to put every dollar in like getting the best that you can, that's the way to go. Obviously, we ensure they work properly, etc., and all these things. So there's some exciting things to come over the next 12 to 16 months. So stay tuned.
Perfect, mate. And what was that website again? If they want to go on there, they want to contact you and get some advice or make some purchases, what's the website again? Yeah,
goingdark.com.au.
All right, Bastian, thanks for coming on the show. I really do appreciate it, and sharing your knowledge on thermals and night vision. It's been a fantastic show. So, guys, jump on there, goingdark.com.au if you want to purchase or want to get more advice on taking your hunting to the next level. So, Bastian, thanks for coming on the show, mate. I super appreciate it. Thanks.
Thanks, Jason. Good to be on.
You've been listening to an episode of the Australian Hunting Podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. See you next time.